independents, they have a lot of technology, but they don't have the time to learn how to use it correctly because, you might have a director of finance who's doing two different jobs. So they're trying to use the technology to get the data out, but they don't fully understand the system because they haven't had the time to learn it. If you take a step back and you look at what you're trying to do, and it may take you a few hours or maybe a day or two to get the information that's needed. But once you take that day or two, it's going to save you weeks ahead of time. So it's like you need to take that painful step back right now and take the time to get it right. Well, you're looking at your labor and you see one property versus another, or even like one food and beverage outlet versus another, and the KPIs or the labor efficiency metrics don't look right. One's better than the other. Well, you're trying to make decisions or forecasting and hiring based on data that's not right. So you just have to make sure that either when you're migrating or when you're doing those integrations, that your data is clean.
What's up, hospitality? Data is today like a gold mine. It's what defines the efficiency of your tech stack. But how can you protect your data from upgrades or a new software in your hotel? Migrating data successfully isn't as simple as one may think. On today's episode, we'll discover the one mistake most hotels make regarding their data, what technological challenges are unique to independent hoteliers, and maybe you can relate to some of them, and what steps the smart hotelier listening to our chats today can take to protect their data when upgrading their tech stack. But first, my name is Mauricio Schulering, and you are listening to the Schulering Hub Talking Hospitality podcast. Today, joining me to help us understand how protect and migrate data is Jody Jacobson from Integrated Hospitality Consulting, which helps hotels to navigate the complexities of hotel technology, accounting, and finance. Jody, welcome to the show. Jody, please introduce yourself and tell our audience what you do.
I'm Jody Jacobson. So I have worked in hospitality for 20 years. What I do is really help hotels when they're migrating systems, from start to finish. Like I can help with the selecting of the technology to the putting together the project plan and then actually project managing it, with hotels and the small staff that they have right now. And they don't always have all of the knowledge, the time actually, when implementing systems. So I really come in and help them make it a smoother process that avoids scope creep and additional costs. That's the goal.
That's very important. And I would say that it's not only the time, the knowledge also, right? I believe that we lack on having the knowledge on how to do that. It's very complex sometimes. I have a little story. In 2017, a hotel group here upgraded their PMS. And when I jumped in 2018, to do the marketing, I couldn't get any data past 2016, right? And I couldn't understand. I called them to understand, like, hi guys, I'm trying to create some segmentation here of our guests, and I can't get anything before 2016. And then they informed me that when they upgraded their own system, the new system didn't read the data from the previous 9 versions, and we didn't have the data anymore. So it's something that we need to speak about and we need to discuss, because probably most, I would say, a big majority of hoteliers don't know that the data is not safe when they are upgrading. So let's get into that. But before, can you tell us how you started in hospitality?
So I started in hospitality right out of college. I started as a staff accountant at a hotel company and was over 2 or 3 properties doing the data, doing reconciliations and journal entries and really just helping the hotels. And that's when I started to understand hotels and the numbers and how they all fed together. And it was a really great team. But, after 7 months, then we started to install a BI system. which was new. Really, 20 years ago, BI was very new. So then I moved into the analytics side, and that's where, my love of numbers and being able to understand, if we pull this lever, what happens? But that's also where I learned, like, if the data's not good, your data, like, it doesn't mean anything. You can say, oh, our labor's high here, but if the data's bad, then you're giving bad information. So that's where I started. So I was 10 years on the hotel side, and then I moved into the software implementation side, which is where then I really saw how things fit together, whether it was through integrations, and, accounting, analytics, working with multiple different hotels, from the independents, the boutiques, up to, the big brands.
And how was this transition of working in the tech side after working in the hotel side played in your career advancement?
It was huge. So, like, learning the hotel side, you're seeing what comes out of the reports, and you understand the data that's going into it. But when you're on the vendor side or the technology side, you're really seeing all of the different systems. And when I was in hotels, I was the go-between between accounting and finance, operations, and IT. So I thought I knew, but then when you're on the vendor side and you start to look at the list of all of the different systems and how they feed in, it just gives you a huge understanding of how the data plays to each other and all the different systems that are available to integrate into the systems and the building blocks on the vendor side. So, on the hotel side, you're seeing what the results are, but you don't see everything that goes into and all the configuration that goes into a system.
And I think very interesting as well to see what is the full potential of a software as well, right? Because when you're in the hotel side, basically you are seeing what that software can do to you, right? And with your tech stack. But when you go to the other side and you see the integrations and what it can do, basically you big, wow, I've been missing so much, right?
Well, exactly. Because especially if you don't utilize training to its full potential, you're not going to use the system to the full potential, and you don't know what you don't know. So going to the vendor side, you're really able to learn and understand everything that's available. And it gives you more questions to ask. So now, because I know pieces of that one software, it makes me know what questions to ask to another software. So
that's true. That's true. So as we talk about these questions and learning more about the softwares and helping the hoteliers, what was the most challenging consulting project that you've been through, and how did you overcome that?
So the most challenging one that I went through, it was a small hotel group, but there was 10 different very different properties, from small, just like service properties, up to big resorts. And they all had an idea of what they needed, and they all had voices, which everybody should have a voice, but you need one central voice bringing everyone together. So it was very much 10 different ideas. And we also use USALI in hotels, the standard accounting. And some properties wanted to use it, some didn't. So there was a lot of heated discussions, fun discussions about what to do. And, I gave my opinion, and I really came into it as an educator. So this is why we do it. This is, what it's going to do for you. And then, try to help the change management. Now, at the end of the day, it's the client's decision, and they decided not to go with what we had suggested. But, that's one of the things as a consultant, you give your best opinion, and then you have to, if they don't want, or they don't think that that's the best for them, then they don't have to use it. So it taught me a lot about communication and just patience, and how to work with different opinions.
And if a hotelier now and a hotel team is going through a very similar situation right now, whatever that is, what would you tell them?
I would tell them just to look at the big picture and look 3, 5, 10 years down the road, and think, okay, I'm doing this for the long term, not for today. It may be more painful today, but if you're looking at your growth and you're looking at what you're going to get, look at it for the long run, because there's certain things that are going to be painful in the day, but it will help you, down the road.
Yes, I'm hearing from so many consultants that they want to bring solutions to save time, right? To help hoteliers to save time. But of course, during the implementation, it takes time to learn. There is a learning curve. And managers are saying that they don't have time to take anything else into their hands, when in the long term, it's actually going to save them so much time that they can take it back. And we are right now in that puzzle, let's say, right? We are in a little bit of a labyrinth that we don't know which side to take. Have you seen anything happen to you as well like that?
Just the time that it takes, or
in general, someone that cannot get the time that they will get in the future in their hands.
Yeah. So if you take a step back and you look at what you're trying to do, and it may take you a few hours or maybe a day or two to get the information that's needed. But once you take that day or two, it's going to save you weeks ahead of time. So it's like you need to take that painful step back right now and take the time to get it right. And then moving forward, it's going to save you more time. But it's hard to see when you're in it.
Very hard to see when we are in it.
Yeah.
And if we get to understand, what's the one mistake that you see hotels making with their data?
So the biggest mistake is with integrations, and they don't take the time to really step back and say, okay, how does all this stuff fit together? So with data, they may have like a revenue management system, a labor system, and an accounting system, and they have it all in these silos, but they're not looking at it together. So it's not talking to each other, so they're not getting the most efficient data. It also can be the data isn't clean. So if you don't have clean data, it's garbage in, garbage out. You're making decisions based off of bad information. You know, it goes back to like when I said, oh, you're looking at your labor and you see one property versus another, or even like one food and beverage outlet versus another, and the KPIs or the labor efficiency metrics don't look right. One's better than the other. Well, you're trying to make decisions or forecasting and hiring based on data that's not right. So you just have to make sure that either when you're migrating or when you're doing those integrations, that your data is clean.
And how come that they would get two types of data for one metric?
Because you could be integrating, or you're integrating data from two different systems or two different outlets, and you have mapped that data differently. So you could have servers from one outlet going to bartenders, where server labor data is going to servers in the other outlet. So it's just really important to take a step back and make sure that data is correct. So I've seen it more times than not that, you know, you're looking at the data and, you know, it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. They must have, you know, they're doing something wrong, but it's like, no, actually your data's coded wrong.
Can you run through an example that you've seen that happening? So I bet that when we put that into a little story, people, you don't need to mention names, mention brands, but when you see that into a story, I bet that people can relate to it and get a better understanding on how it happened.
So let's go to like a system upgrade. You're upgrading from one accounting system to another, and you have ADR, and you're looking at what your room sold and your room revenue. So you have a market segment, and you've coded your room sold to the correct market segment, but then your room revenue has gone to the incorrect market segment. And then you're looking at your reports and your ADR is really low. And you're like, well, that doesn't make sense. Like, what happened? You know, did a lot of rooms get comped that month? But then you go back and look, and it's because the data isn't aligned, so your ADR isn't correct. So you're reporting data that's wrong because the mapping wasn't correct.
This happens quite often, you say.
Especially if the data isn't clean. So if you're just, and a lot of times the data process when you're migrating from one system to another is overlooked, and it is looked as something that's easy. But it's really not that easy, because you need to be allowed the time to look at what the data is in the system and what it is in the old system, and then what it comes over as. But because it's minimalized, it's not given the time or the resources. And then hotels end up spending more money, more time, more money because they have to go back and redo it.
Makes sense. There's another question about this later that we're going to ask from the comments on LinkedIn. But let's get to our questions here. But what's technological? Oh, sorry about that. What technological challenges are unique to the independent hoteliers that you see? Can you give us a few examples?
So to independents, they have a lot of technology, but they don't have the time to learn how to use it correctly because, you might have a director of finance who's doing two different jobs. They're trying to use the technology to get the data out, but they don't fully understand the system because they haven't had the time to learn it. That also goes into training because they haven't had the time to document, and there's a lot of turnover. So when you're not allowed the time, you're not able to learn the systems and utilize them to their full potential.
That's true. I've seen people in independent hotels, a revenue manager, for example, running 9 properties, 10 properties, one person, right? And of course, all they want is automation, right? Not really looking after what's happening.
Yeah, well, and it goes back to the other thing, that we were just talking about is, it takes time. If you take the 2 days or the day to learn it and to implement it correctly, then it's going to save you time in the future. But you get stuck in that moment where you're like, oh, I just have so much to do that you can't learn the technology to its full potential.
And you help hoteliers with the educational part as well, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. And what is for them the hardest thing when it comes to learning? Is it just the time to invest in learning, or is something about also the learning curve, the fast development of technology? What's the main complaints you hear?
It's the inability to learn. I think it's the inability to be able to document the procedures and easily hand off to somebody else. So a lot of times we'll do the training and, you can only have one person in there and then the other person is going to train everybody else. But it doesn't end up that one person can train everybody else because they're also have their other jobs to do. So then they're trying to train fast. Things don't get documented properly. And then you're doing a handoff and then there's turnover and they don't have the time to actually learn. So they want to, it's just there's only so many hours in the day. If they can have good documentation and, learning's you don't always need to have a trainer there, but if there's a recording or, an SOP, it helps.
So what is missing is a knowledge database where they can tap in anytime.
Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of times vendors will say, well, we have this knowledge base, but there's still differences between property to property. So if you don't have somebody who's making that knowledge base specific to your property or making updates, it's not going to be as good as it could be.
Right. So would suggest that the hotels start hiring a chief knowledge officer for the hotels?
So, that's really not possible especially for independents, that would be great. But, if you have somebody on staff that you can actually say, okay, we need you to do this documentation, or, bring in a consultant to do the documentation and just say, okay, you have 5 days, do the documentation, that can be helpful. It's just make sure that you have the documentation or recordings so that it's easily transferable to everybody else.
That's great. That's great. And if you would share some steps that the hotelier can take on their own regarding their data in case they are planning an upgrade. So something that they can start preparing before someone like you arrive, or even the system can help them. What would you tell them?
I would say clean the data, standardize the data, and prioritize what matters. So clean the data. I think I've said it a few times, but, make sure the data that you're going to transfer makes sense. If you switched departments 5 years ago, then do you need to update and do journal entries to bring that data into the other department? Or, are all of your stats correct? Are all your, covers to the right places? Are your rooms to the right places? Standardizing your data, making sure that if your data hasn't been recorded in the same way, like if your servers were going to bartenders in one outlet and they were going to servers in the other department, well, correct that moving forward. So make sure that everything's standardized, and then, prioritize your data. So what's really important? Do you really need the last 20 years of data, or is the last 5 years of data all you need? Because the 15 years before that isn't important, because the more data you bring over, the more it's going to cost, the more time it's going to take. So just really make sure that everybody is on the same page and understands, what do you need? Like, what is really important?
Oh, and I have a question actually from the audience, from Brian Schwitz. I hope that I said your name right, Brian. Sorry if I didn't. But because it's really connected to what you just said. He asked how much time you recommend a hotel spend on understanding and cleaning their data before a migration.
So, I mean, that's a hard one, because it depends on how much data you have, or how many properties, how much data. I mean, at least, I would say 2 to 3 days, just to go through it and really understand how it's posted and if it makes sense. So, I mean, yeah, 2 days, 3 days, it could be more depending on how many properties, but it's not something that you can sit down in a half a day and say, okay, our data's good.
All right. Good. And there is a question from Martin Patricini, and it's about more structured data here, but how important it is to have a structured data, how important it is to have structured hotel data in the new area of personal AI assistants and Google AI search. And what is the difference between a hotel having its data structured or not in consequence on AI connectivity?
So I think it's huge. So it's really important to have your data structured, because, the way that AI is going to be reading the data is it's going to be reading what you're giving it. If it's not structured and it can't make sense of it, then the data that they're outputting isn't going to make sense. And, it's garbage in, garbage out. I say it probably too much. But the more structured it is, the more the AI is going to be able to read it and give you actionable data, or give you actionable reports. In the era of AI, there's a lot of cool tools out there. I've seen, a lot of like actual revenue management ones lately, where the reports are great. They're going to be actionable. But if it's the data that's coming in isn't structured, it's going to be hard for it to give you actionable data. And then the people that are using that data are just going to end up going back to their manual spreadsheets.
And for the hotelier 101, how to structure their data, how they structure their data.
So, make sure that it's clear. So, and it really depends on what the data is that they're structuring. So if it's revenue, make sure that you have your room sold and your room revenue data structured in the same way. So your rates are coming in the same way, and you have all of your different data points so that they can be separated in a smart way.
Right. And I have a question about that, because when you were talking about the structured data as well, and I think I know Martin Patricini well, and he's asking about the company that he works with. But when it comes to structured data and big data, right? Because when it comes to big data, normally it's a company that owns that data and not the hotel itself. And if you want to migrate to another company, can you migrate this structured data that belongs to another company towards a different system? Let's say changing a chatbot.
Yeah, well,
Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the show and if you're learning something new today, please consider following the show, subscribe to our channel, or leave us a review. It helps us to help more people through the podcast, and it would mean the world to us. Thank you for listening, and we're back on the chat.
it depends on what the company, that depends on the contract, what the company will allow you to take. So there's a lot of things in place that, yes, maybe you could take your data. I mean, you should be able to, but it just depends on what it is.
Right, yeah, because I always had that question in the back of my mind, right? If we're using a system that is providing the structured data to us and we need to change the system, or for any reason change to something else that we want to leverage this data, how do we use them? But it really depends on the vendor, right?
Well, it depends. I mean, if you own the data, then generally they'll export it into a database, and it's the structure that they've had it. And then there's different tools out there that help you migrate it. but it just depends on, without knowing what the company is or what the data is, it just depends on what the agreement is. But if it's your data, then generally they export it into a database or Excel documents. So
That should be easy, right?
yeah,
It should.
you always think it will be, but
Until the day. And as we move towards the future thinking, right? Because here we play this game about the future, right? So it's a disclaimer here that we are not predicting the future because nobody can do that. It's just more a game to brainstorm how the future could look like and give some food for thought. And people can think like that and think, well, maybe they are right, maybe not, but I never thought about that angle before. So disclaimer mate, let's dream about the future a little bit. As we move towards an AI world, what should hoteliers add to their planned projects regarding the data?
So I think the biggest thing is when we add to the AI world, and it kind of goes back to what we we're just talking about, is making sure your data is clean, because AI can only read what it's given. It's not a person, who's taking the data and then they have to manually manipulate it because they know something's wrong. It's going to be really, really important to make sure that that data is clean and what's going in is correct, because then you're going to get that actionable data and you're going to know. So you get the actionable data and you're going to know what decisions that you can make. The other thing is going to be how do systems connect? So it's going to be really important as we move into AI to make sure that the systems that connect and that can give efficiency metrics are connected. So like revenue management, labor, your accounting data, making sure that all of that is feeding into each other and that AI can read it in a manageable and smart way, so that then it's spitting out or giving you the reports and saying, you have too many people scheduled in this area.
And let's just recap. So if a hotel wants to migrate system or migrate their data to either a new system, a new provider, first thing they need to do is clean up the data, and that may take 2-3 days, maybe more, maybe less, but they need to really clean up and understand that their data is valid. Point number one, right?
Sure. Yes.
If we go to number two.
No, go. I was going to say, and that includes like making sure that any duplicate vendors are out, duplicate folios, things like that. Like get rid of all that, the garbage.
Great. All the garbage, all the duplicates, all the garbage that you can see. Then you structure this data in a way that it makes sense, right? What does it mean quickly?
Structuring it in a way so like you have all the same departments together, you have all the same the accounts that should be mapped together. So just structuring it in a readable way.
Would you suggest any type of software to assist a hotel on structure their data?
So there are a lot of vendors out there that actually have tools that can be used. So I don't have any particular one that I would suggest, but there's a lot of different tools that different vendors use.
For us here, for my company, we use Notion to categorize everything into data and the knowledge database. Have you used Notion before?
I haven't, no.
Right. So that's one that's really cool to extract data. And I even know a few people that are creating Notion systems for hotels. So I just wanted to know that. So it's a great way. Maybe, I don't know if it's for everyone, but it maybe works. And what's the third item again that you said about the data? Cleaning, structure, and?
Plan for flexibility. Make sure that the way that you're structuring your data once it goes into your new system is going to help you in the future. Don't just look in the short window, look long term, 5-10 years out. So, if you're planning on expanding, make sure that that structure allows for it. So, especially in AI, the way that you structure your data is really going to make adoption easier or harder.
And are you excited about AI jumping in to hospitality?
So I am. I'm really excited about it, and I'm excited about it for a few different reasons. So I think AI is going to make the reporting easier, especially for like your independents. Because if you have your structure right, AI is going to be able to give you the data faster rather than having somebody manually put data together. So then, like if you take revenue management, for example, example. AI can generate the tools. It can, look at what your pacing is. And then it really allows your revenue managers to make decisions and be more strategic. So you're taking the work of putting the reports together out of their hands, because you want them to be using their knowledge to be more strategic. And I think it's also going to help with some of the labor shortages and just people not having time. So I'm hoping that I think AI is going to help us with some of those manual tasks and make our jobs more strategic in the future.
I hope with you, Jody. I hope with you.
Yeah.
Would you share an inspiring message to the hoteliers out there?
So I think I think hotels are the heart and soul of so many things. It's so important, and we give so much to people. Guest experience. There's so much that we do for people, and there's so much technology coming that I'm hoping is going to make our jobs easier and really help us focus on the guest experience. And speaking of technology, when you're looking at what's coming, it's much more, it's going to be much easier to roll out to the smaller independents, and it's much more cost effective. So there's a lot of stuff coming, but it's easier, I think, or hopefully will be easier for everyone to use.
Implementation is always going to be a headache. So if things are coming easier and it makes sense, they are logical for the staff, hopefully there will be less rejection, less barriers built for technology to be implemented in the hotel, and we can really provide a great guest experience to everyone that's attending and visiting our properties, isn't it?
Yeah.
Jody, was a pleasure talking to you, learning a little bit more on how to migrate data. I have to be honest, I think that data is fascinating, because I cannot understand how we can have so much data and transfer and record and be accessing all this data nowadays. And I think that's fascinating. And I believe that there is so much that we need to still understand as we move towards AI controlled world. I even using this word right now, but thank you so much for spend some time with us. How can our audience get in touch with you, learn more about what you do, and why not hire you to help them?
So you can email me at jody.jacobson@integratedhospitalityconsulting.com. Also, I'm on LinkedIn, Jody Jacobson. So that's really the best way.
And I would suggest you, hotelier, to really follow Jody on LinkedIn, because she does share some valuable content and her experience of that. That's how I got to know her work, and I was curious to bring her in, because she does share some valuable content there. So it's worth your time. So please just go there and follow Jody. You will not regret. And then you can take me later. Jody, thank you so much for being part of the show, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you. It was really great. I appreciate it.
Schulering, thanks for listening. I'll see you next week. Bye.